This week, we wrapped up our Want More series, and we looked at the baptism of the Holy Spirit. In other words, it's the Holy Spirit that already lives inside of us as believers, being outpoured and coming and flowing out of us. Paul put a big emphasis on this when he talked to the Corinthians. In the beginning of 1 Corinthians in chapter 2, he says, you know what? It wasn't about my wise words. It wasn't about my persuasiveness, but it was a demonstration of the power of the Spirit. In other words, it wasn't Paul relying on himself to do what God had called him to do. It was the Holy Spirit working through Paul that brought people to Jesus in Corinth. That was a very tough environment for Paul. The people there weren't listening to him for months after months. He wasn't seeing new converts. I mean, you see in the book of Acts, if you check out chapter 18, it chronicles what Paul went through there in Corinth, and a very frustrating time. But then the Spirit showed up. It flowed out of Paul, and things changed. Here's the deal. Everybody is called by God to do something. God has given you a vision. God has given you a calling. But He doesn't just give you a calling. He doesn't just give you a vision. He equips us for that vision. He equips us for that calling. He has freely given us the gift of what we call the baptism of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's already in work in us as believers. He's already developing fruits of the Spirit, the love, the patience, the kindness, the self-control, all of that. We're becoming more like Christ, having spiritual maturity and depth through that. But on top of that, He wants to give us the power of the Holy Spirit. We can be developing. We can be followers of Christ. But when we take hold of the gifts of the Spirit, it takes what we're doing and magnifies it. It gives us more power for God to work through us. It's really about us yielding more of ourselves to more of Him. Letting God use more of us to do more of His work here on earth. I want you to think about some times that you've had a hardship, where you're going through a hard time and you just can't get done what you need to get done. Take a moment and discuss that. If God were to show up, how would that situation look differently? What kind of power do you need God to show up in those situations you go through? All right, lastly, we looked at several of the gifts of the Spirit that Paul talks about that are available to us. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 11, pull the Bible out, pull it up on your phone or right there in your group, and look at those gifts that Paul talks about. And that's not all of the gifts of the Spirit that's mentioned throughout the Bible. There's gifts in Romans and other places, but these are what we collectively refer to as the gifts of the Spirit. Take a look through these. Some of them may sound confusing and weird, but take a moment and look at them. You see that in these gifts, these are the gifts that God gives us to accomplish His ministry. When you're trying to reach your friends, when you're trying to reach your neighbors, when you're trying to do what God's called you to do, how can utilizing this power that God has freely given us change the game for you? Guys, thank you for taking a look at this series. Thank you for yielding more of yourself to the Holy Spirit. He is at work in you. I want to leave you with this one thought. If you want to do something great for God, you need the power of His Spirit. So go home or pray together in a group, pray at church, but wherever you do it, seek the power of the Holy Spirit to be manifested in your life.